Junior doctors urged to drop their disruptive and undemocratic 5-day strikes. Healthcare and hospital representatives say many patients would be hit by disproportionate action that no one voted for.
125,000 cancelled operations and 1 million lost outpatient appointments that, to be frank, the NHS simply can't cope with.
Also tonight, a serving British Marine is charged with Northern Ireland-related terror offences and fraud.
Battery fires force Samsung to abandon the launch of their new phone and recall those already in use.
And they may be our best friends, but what they pick up on a walk isn't. The dangers of the common tick.
This is the ITV Evening News with Alistair Stewart and Ranveer Singh.
Good evening. England's NHS Hospital Trust tonight added their voice to the growing calls for junior doctors to abandon a series of strikes due to start in just over a week. They and other healthcare providers urged the BMA to call off the 5-day walkouts over new contracts, insisting they would risk safety and cause major disruption.
Earlier, senior doctors, patients groups and almost all of the Royal Colleges of Medicine said the escalating industrial action is disproportionate. But the junior doctors are standing firm, saying it's the new contract that endangers patients. Here's our political correspondent, Libby Wiener.
Whatever the merits of the junior doctors' case, after months of disruption, hospital bosses tonight said enough was enough. In a letter to the BMA, they urged doctors' leaders to call off the strike action due to start in 10 days' time in the interests of patients. With barely any notice for trusts to prepare, the employers' organisations wrote, this unprecedented level of strike action will cause major disruption and risk patient safety.
All we're saying is that the consequences that we're worried about are 125,000 cancelled operations and 1 million lost outpatient appointments that, to be frank, the NHS simply can't cope with at this point. And that's why we're saying to junior doctors, please think very, very carefully and please reconsider.
The Health Secretary himself wouldn't comment today.
What are you going to do about that?
But he and the Prime Minister are also facing pressure to resolve the dispute. The Patients Association saying Mrs May should pause the imposition of the contract.
We would like her to do what she did with Hinkley Point, for example, and take time to think about it, look at it in real detail and find out from patients and perhaps other members of staff in the health service what needs to be done.
Junior doctors say the new contract was missold from the start as being part of a 7-day NHS when it was really about stretching the workforce more thinly.
Jeremy Hunt has treated junior doctors like children. He has treated them in the most demoralising way possible. He has not listened.
If that is the case, why has the Academy representing the Royal Colleges intervened and said your action is not proportionate?
The Academy of Colleges, whatever they've said about industrial action, every doctor agrees that this contract, as part of the 7-day plan as they stand, is not safe to proceed.
But whatever their views, it seems the tide of opinion among their colleagues, both senior doctors and managers, is moving against them. First the Royal Colleges and now hospital bosses. It seems that support for the junior doctors is slowly beginning to ebb away. The BMA has yet to respond, but their members now face the question as to whether they're really prepared to go ahead with 5 days of industrial action next month.
Libby, thank you.
A serving Royal Marine has appeared in court accused of making and hiding bombs and concealing firearms to be used in Northern Ireland-related terrorism. Kieran Maxwell is also charged with having a Northern Irish police uniform and a faked police pass.
The 30-year-old was arrested in Somerset last week and was brought to court in London today. Paul Davis has the latest.
With an escort of armed officers, the police van carrying Kieran Maxwell was driven away from court after the serving Royal Marine was charged with a series of terrorist offences. The 30-year-old, originally from Northern Ireland, was arrested a week ago in Devon, where he now lives. Today, he merely confirmed his age and his address as the court heard the charges against him. Kieran Maxwell is accused of researching an act of terrorism, resulting in the creation of a library of documents providing information likely to be useful to a person committing or preparing an act of terrorism. Purchasing and obtaining chemicals and components connected with the commission, preparation or instigation of an act of terrorism. Manufacturing explosive substances and constructing explosive devices. And creating hides in England and Northern Ireland to store explosive substances, ammunition and weapons. The charges relate to the discovery of 2 hidden caches of weapons and explosives in 2 country parks in Northern Ireland earlier this year. An arsenal of bomb-making equipment was found concealed in hidden barrels. The police operation has also focused on the area in Devon where Maxwell lived while serving in 40 Commando. The Royal Marine has been remanded in custody, awaiting his next court appearance. Kieran Maxwell is originally from Larne in Northern Ireland. It's understood that his arrest is linked to a police investigation into alleged dissident Republican activity. Now, unusually tonight, he's been taken to a police station and not to prison to await his next appearance, which will be back here at this court on Monday.
Paul Davis, thank you.
Samsung has abandoned the UK launch of its new flagship smartphone after reports that dozens have exploded. 2.5 million Galaxy Note 7s have been sold around the world, and those with suspected faulty batteries have been recalled. It comes as Samsung's rival Apple is thought to be just days away from launching its latest iPhone, as Central Carrier reports.
Just wanted to post this and share what just happened to my Note 7.
The burnt remains of a new Samsung Galaxy Note 7.
Went to put it on my waist and it caught fire. Brand new phone, not even 2 weeks old. Be careful out there.
And he's not alone. Samsung is now recalling the phone after the same thing happened to at least 35 others. The phone was only launched a fortnight ago and was due to go on sale in the UK today. But now Samsung has had to halt shipments and recall the handsets. The head of its mobile division looked contrite at a news conference in South Korea today, saying he was deeply sorry to customers and offered anyone who'd bought the phone replacements. And this could not have come at a worse time for Samsung. Flying high on strong smartphone sales, it was trying hard to push itself ahead of its major rival Apple, which is just days away from launching its newest iPhone. One smartphone expert told me this was a major blow for Samsung.
This was supposed to be its primary phone, its flagship for the second half of the year, and it was supposed to be a real rival to the iPhone launch, which is going to be happening next week. So the timing is terrible, but in terms of what Samsung's done, it's acted quickly, it's solved the problem as best it can.
With its share price and consumer confidence both taking a tumble, Samsung will want to get to the bottom of this problem, and fast. Sejal Karia, ITV News.
The Green Party has announced it will have 2 new leaders. Caroline Lucas and Jonathan Bartley were elected as co-leaders at the Greens Autumn Conference in Birmingham. Both have spoken of wanting to form a progressive alliance with Labour.
Long-suffering Southern Rail passengers reacted with fury today as it was revealed one of the firm's parent companies made profits of £100 million. The boss of Go Ahead Group apologised to commuters for the misery they've had to endure and said he wouldn't be accepting his bonus. But as our consumer editor Chris Choi reports, it has reignited calls for the network to be renationalised.
After all the cancellations, strikes and disruption, some good news, not for passengers but for investors, as a firm linked to Southern Rail unveils profits so high they've left commuters furious.
I think it's disgusting that over the last 3 months we had nothing but strikes, delays.
They should be running the service properly. They're paid to do it properly and they're not doing it properly.
The firm that operates Southern Rail is 65% owned by Go Ahead Group. Today it reported pre-tax profits of £99.8 million. That's a 27% rise, and it comes just a day after £20 million of taxpayers' money went to help with problems on the Southern Rail network. As long-suffering passengers raised objections to the profits, TV cameras weren't allowed into Go Ahead's investors' meeting, but audio was released of its boss apologising for disruption.
We have been apologising for that, we continue to apologise for that, but all our efforts are about how do we improve the situation.
The chief executive of Go Ahead Group, which has that financial stake in Southern Rail, today said he won't be taking a bonus, but last year he did earn a total of more than £2 million. The company says most passenger discomfort has been caused by redevelopment of stations and track. Southern says it made zero profit. Today's earnings are for other parts of the parent company, but unions use today's developments to renew calls for change.
This is a failing franchise operated by a company who, at the end of the day, are making money and getting money for failure. We now need to see some dramatic change. We need to see the government intervene and take back the franchise.
The journey ahead looks just as bumpy, with more strikes on Southern Rail planned for next week. Chris Choi, ITV News.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News, the ticks living in our dog's fur and how you could be at risk.
And the wheelchair tennis player hoping to add a Paralympic gold to his Wimbledon title. Those stories and more after the break. Welcome back. As Theresa May prepares to fly to China for this weekend's G20 summit, there was a warning from one of the country's business leaders that she must do more to reassure investors.
The two countries' relationship has been tested by Mrs May's decision to delay approval of the Chinese-backed Hinkley Point nuclear plant. And as our China correspondent Debbie Edward reports, it's also her first global summit as Prime Minister.
China takes great pride in hosting the G20 summit, a chance for the country to show it has arrived as a global superpower. Delegates being greeted with a full red carpet and military welcome. For President Xi, seen here greeting the leader of Indonesia, this is a defining moment in his leadership. And so too could it be for Britain's relationship with China. The Prime Minister will take her place among the world leaders arriving in Hangzhou, trying to prevent a Chinese chill turning into a freeze.
After Brexit, the UK will be less sexy, okay? So you need to make your efforts to attract foreign investment from anywhere, including from China.
Theresa May's decision to pause for thought on the Hinkley nuclear power plant has antagonised the world's second biggest economy. The Chinese particularly angered by a suggestion it was due to national security concerns.
When within weeks of entering number 10, Theresa May put the brakes on the Hinkley Point nuclear project, she was deemed to have tarnished the so-called golden era in UK-China relations. She has since written to President Xi and said she hoped for constructive talks at this weekend's summit. A letter described in state media here as grovelling.
The Hinkley delay has cast doubt over Chinese investment in the HS2 rail link and a potential third runway at Heathrow. In Manchester, it's a Beijing company building George Osborne's dream of a northern powerhouse. They've invested almost £1 billion so far, but want reassurances before they spend any more.
We would like to hear, as a company who invested in UK, that her views and her visions of the future of UK, and also to reassure our investment is safe, and also the relationship between the two countries will continue to be good.
At this G20, hosted by China, Theresa May looks set to get a tough introduction to international diplomacy. Debbie Edward, ITV News, Hangzhou.
Here, dog owners are being warned that tiny ticks are posing a bigger danger to their pets than previously thought. A new study suggests almost a third of dogs may be carrying the creatures, some of which can pass on debilitating and potentially deadly diseases to humans too, as Martha Fairley explains.
Lurking in our woods and undergrowth, not just in the countryside but also in our cities, Britain's tick population is thriving, as dog walkers on Wimbledon Common have found out.
We've not really ever found any on the dog. My son's had a couple, and I've had friends that have had ticks before.
These are the tiny ticks in question. Just a few millimetres long, they bite passing animals and humans. A study of 15,000 dogs in Britain found almost a third of them had ticks. TV presenter and naturalist Chris Packham says they're surprisingly common.
There's a greater overwinter survival of the adult ticks, and they're active earlier in the spring, which means in turn they have a longer breeding season, and the population is therefore growing quite rapidly. And we were out at the start of the Big Tick project on a very cold, rainy March day, and I thought we'd be struggling to find any. But after a few minutes of sampling, we had a handful.
But ticks can also carry potentially fatal diseases. Vet Sarah Bignell's still recovering 5 years after she caught Lyme disease from a tick in the Scottish Highlands.
That affected many of my organs, gave me heart problems, my kidneys weren't working properly, my gut, but mostly my brain. I had terrible, terrible pain.
Ticks are more prevalent in the southwest, East Anglia and Scotland, but vets say by taking the right precautions, dogs and their owners can still enjoy the countryside safely. Martha Fairley, ITV News, Wimbledon Common.
Microbeads could be banned in household products by the end of next year, it's emerged. The government is set to unveil plans for the ban tomorrow and will then consult on which products will be affected. Body scrubs, toothpastes and other beauty products contain the small pieces of plastic which then find their way into our oceans and affect marine life.
And the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have visited the Eden Project in Cornwall. They came face to face with a lifelike baby dinosaur, which appeared to take quite a liking to the royal couple, and why not?
And finally, all this week we've been highlighting some of the inspirational British athletes who are heading to the Paralympics for the first time. We've heard how they've overcome incredible hurdles just to get to the start line.
Tonight we hear from wheelchair tennis player Gordon Reid, who at just 24 is competing in his third Games. In the final part of her series, Ready for Rio, Sally Lockwood heard how he hopes to inspire a new generation of stars.
What he has in power, he matches in agility. And timing is everything. But wheelchair tennis takes twice the exertion. Gordon Reid is at the top of the game, something he modestly puts down to his Scottish heritage.
Yeah, maybe it is something in the water up here, but maybe it's just that kind of Scottish grit and determination as well. So we want to try and...
Now a role model to the next generation, Gordon was just a few years older than these children when he lost the use of his legs. With no warning and no accident, a neurological condition changed life as he knew it forever, just a week before his 13th birthday.
Lowest point was probably lying in a hospital bed near the start, when I was, didn't know what was going on, couldn't feel my legs, had friends and family crying around me, everyone really upset, and it was just a kind of feeling of not knowing what was going to happen after that.
But after that traumatic time, wheelchair tennis was key to his recovery. The only difference to the able-bodied game is the ball can bounce twice before it's hit. Gordon's now British #1 and this year became the first ever wheelchair Wimbledon singles champion. Similar credentials to another Scotsman.
Andy Murray's a big role model for me. He's somebody I've followed since he was a youngster, competing at Wimbledon for the first times, and now he's at the top of the sport, and coming from the same country as me. And just his attitude towards his career and his desire and his passion, I think is a great example to a lot of people out there.
The same can be said for Gordon himself, who says he's proof that life's not over because of a disability.
Message for any other kid who's in a similar situation to me is to just go out there and give it a go. Sometimes you don't know what you're capable of until you go and do it. My goal in Rio is to try and come home with 2 gold medals.
And bringing home his first Paralympic medal would top Gordon's glory year. Sally Lockwood, ITV News.
Well, we wish him all the best, don't we?
We do indeed. Raggy Omar will be here with news at 10.
But from all the team here, have a very good evening.
And
Bye-bye.
a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.